Oh, no worries. Better now. How's everybody doing today?
Good,
We're doing
good.
great. We were just showing a couple of the pictures of your photographs on Instagram.
I had some great access with the Cuban national team recently here in Canada's capital for the 2 weeks of summer we get every year. So it's good. They were here on tour playing against the Independent League, and so had some up close access, which I have in the past, and it's very interesting, and was lucky in some regards to capture some of the photos I did. As obviously we had some big news yesterday break. So
I gotta ask, where did the fascination, the love of Cuban baseball, where did that start?
Yeah, so simple enough. I was kind of lured to go down to Cuba in 2012, originally just as a vacation to try and escape the winter, but with a good friend of mine that I played baseball with, who said that I'd love it. I didn't know really what to expect, and so in some ways it's overwhelming. In other ways, it's underwhelming in the infrastructure. The stadiums are impressive, but definitely dated. So while there, we went to see a couple games. Before I did, a few of the locals were telling me that one of the guys playing for Cienfuegos was a chap that I absolutely had to see. And it turned out that was Jose Abreu. And so seeing him play the first time, right away could see that, all the players were talented, but you could tell right away that this guy had something special. And within about 6 months of that, he was playing in the majors. And then in subsequent trips, it just seemed like every time that I went down, I'd kind of see a player look and go, I bet you that guy, if the majors could get a hold of him, could really have an impact, and seemed to happen fairly consistently. So.
That's awesome. And so was Yoelkis one of these guys that you kind of thought?
Well, more so, obviously, in the name recognition. So
Okay.
he first kind of came across the blotter about 2 years ago, and so the Cuban national team has been doing a tour playing against the CanAm League. They did it in 2016, 2017, took a little break and came back this year. So obviously saw the name recognition by comparison to the rest of the team, which was probably a little bit more mature. So kind of saw that, and I guess to get into it, there's no doubt. I think for people who don't know, that he has left the team while they were in New York, just outside New York City, and with the eyes of once he can establish residency in another country and be declared a free agent, basically to sign eventually with a major league team. The caveat I might give on it is that he is only half brother of Yoelkis Céspedes, the star of the Mets, and his older brother is probably the most gifted power hitter to come out of Cuba. So I go back and forth a little bit on it. The tools are there, the pedigree is there. I don't think the path is going to be as linear as people think it will at first.
Sure.
With the restrictions that are on spending, I would look at, and of course it's not my money. I would probably take the risk on him, but I think when you look at the path that UN Moncada or Lourdes Gurriel Jr. that have taken with the White Sox, with the Blue Jays, where it's not necessarily as immediate an impact as people would think. I think people need to have a little bit of patience with some of the younger players now. They're not as polished as the previous generations, like Abreu and Gurriel. Cuba's very much a breaking ball league, so that's probably one of the adjustments. Adjusting to the lifestyle is a big thing, but the reality is that most of these guys aren't facing the consistent fastballs that they'll see even in unaffiliated ball now, but especially the minors and then in the majors. So I think that's the biggest adjustment, going from a breaking ball league to a fastball league.
How do you see the state of baseball right now in Cuba?
Yeah, it's facing a lot of pressures, and so there's no doubt that I hate to say it's in decline. There's a lot of pressures politically. There's a lot of pressures. More kids are playing soccer. The next generation is spending more time on their cell phones. Resources are a big issue. And so, what we've seen over the past few years is the sheer amount of drain is incredible, and that's just the players that you do hear about. But some of the estimates peg that in 2016 alone, 150 players probably left for other opportunities. I mean, if 10 of those guys make to the majors, maybe another 10, 15 are in the minors. Those are just a number of guys that have disappeared, and that's in a 16-team league. So it's they're trying to do some things. Some of those players have been repatriated, and actually some interesting stories that Yoelkis Betancourt, former major leaguer, is actually going to be coming back to play in Cuba. Buena, who had signed with the Dodgers, is going to be coming back. But it's the sheer amount of drain is incredible. But I guess what I would say is there's probably more Cuban baseball talent than there's ever been. It's just a lot of it's not in Cuba.
Interesting.
Oh.
Very interesting. So are they in the Dominican? Are they in Japan? Where do they end up?
Well, there's some of that. There are a number of players that have gone to Dominican. They've either established their residency there with hopes of going to the majors. There are some guys there that have just gotten out and are hoping for a chance. And we've seen different things there. There are a few guys that went to Dominican, probably realized that their stock wasn't as high as they hoped and were allowed to come back to Cuba. The Japanese structure is a little bit different. That actually there's quite a few mature players that have gone over there and can make a good living and are allowed to bring that back. So a couple of the bigger hitters, or probably the best hitter still on the island, even though he's quite a bit older, would be Alfredo Despaigne, who plays in Japan and does very well. And so it's a structure that works for some guys. And I mean, there are players playing professionally all over. Some are allowed to come and go, some aren't. So there are guys playing in Mexico, Panama, Italy. There are quite a few players that are playing in Ontario this year, and Quebec City, as part of the CanAm League, has built a little bit of a pipeline. There's the Kitchener Panthers of the Intercounty Baseball League, which has built a nice pipeline, and they use 4 spots every year to bring in imports. And actually, I'm hoping to travel down to see them at some point this summer to capture some of those stories and some of those photos. So yeah, there's Cuban baseball talent all over the world. And there is still quite a bit in Cuba. It's just, I think you see that the learning curve once they get off the island is steeper than it used to be, and the pitching has taken a serious step backwards. Some of that is in the approach, some of it's nutrition, some of it's training. It's a lot of different factors. So.
Now, Phil, you have a film, correct?
Yes.
That I'd like you to tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I touch on kind of some of my own experiences, and as I said, I've been going since about 2012 and chronicling different things. And then about 3 years ago, the team here in Ottawa had brought in a couple of import players. One of them was a gentleman named Alexander Melleta. And so my Spanish isn't strong. I rely on Google Translate quite a bit. And one of the quirks I find is that anytime a pronoun appears in Google Translate that's also a proper noun, it kind of switches that out for it doesn't recognize that it's a name. So Melleta is loosely Mayeta, which is a suitcase. So basically I put together the story following him and had met him in Cuba before, so it's kind of worlds connecting in my story. Also given a little bit of a breakdown on the structure of the Cuban National Series, and so it's called Have Melleta Will Travel. That was screened at the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2017 as part of the Cooperstown Film Festival, and actually now resides in their reserve as well. And that can be seen on my Facebook page. I also have it on YouTube as well.
Wow,
so
very cool.
how do you go about getting the film in the Cooperstown Film Festival? Do you just email it out to them, or how does that process happen?
Yeah, no, so I'd found out about it and kind of set that as a goal. And before I had crafted the film itself, I'd done a number of video projects. I do some short info videos, and some of them you'll see on the Instagram page there. So I got into contact for the film festival and sent a couple samples asking if that seemed to be in line with what they might be looking for. And they said, "Oh, this is good, but we're looking for maybe a little bit more narrative." So I said, "Okay, let me see what I can do." Kind of put that together and then submitted it, and sure enough was accepted and came down on the a beautiful September weekend in 2017 and displayed that, and was up with some pretty heavy hitters as it goes, and probably the best compliment that I received was when displayed with another film. One of the audience members asked them what their budget was. He said, "Oh, we got about $500,000 in funding." He leans to me and goes, "What was your budget?" I looked and said, "What's a budget?"
That's awesome.
That's a great response.
That had to feel like kind of like an I did it moment, right? Like,
validated almost.
Yeah. Absolutely, and so I mean, it's. I like to joke that I was the second Selig to go into the Hall of Fame. And
I was gonna say, is there any relation?
Nah, Bud hasn't returned my phone calls. Maybe this will get me there, but it's not a common name here in Canada, and actually I can tell I have to go on a baseball blog for people to pronounce it correctly, because I've heard every butchering, but typically you can tell if someone's a baseball fan if they get it correctly.
Right.
Oh, okay.
That's awesome. That's funny.
So I have a question, Phil. Have you maintained, or have you been able to see any of the guys who defected in the past, and have you seen them in the present? Is there a relationship?
Yeah, so I don't want to overstate that. I've kept in touch with a few, and recently put together a couple videos and some photos. So there's a couple of youngsters that signed with the Marlins, and they're currently in the advanced A ball. That would be in Victor Mesa and Victor Mesa Jr. So they're working their way through the system. I believe Mesa Jr. was actually just promoted from extended spring training to the Gulf Coast League. Victor is currently injured, so I think he's been having some problems with his legs, which has kind of helped or held back his development time. But no, keep in touch with a few guys there, and increasingly, the social media world has made life easier in some regards, and as much as, like I said, there's a bit of a language barrier. Sometimes I have increasing players that are still on the island that send me messages wondering when I'm going to come back, and some of the photos that I've shared with them are kind of maybe the first that they've seen of professional photos of themselves. So that's definitely opening some doors, and my focus moving forward, any opportunity that I can get to shoot players while they're here is great. I try to get down to Cuba at least once, maybe twice a year, and that seems to be opening some doors. More guys are familiar with me and kind of mug for the camera when they see me, and creating and with the digital realm is actually pretty fascinating. That you would think that they wouldn't be able to see a lot of the stuff, but they do, and so Wi-Fi, as they like to call it on the island, the Wi-Fi is definitely increasing and opening some doors, and I'm probably more popular in Cuba than I am in Canada.
Well, you're definitely popular here because we love your photos.
Yes, and I got to say, too,
thank you.
The CanAm League, there's a special connection between Cuban players and the CanAm League, and there has been for a while, right? And for those, could you explain it to people who maybe aren't familiar about that?
Yeah, so I think it was the president of the Quebec Capitals going back, I want to say about 2015. So my own experience, Ottawa joined the CanAm League in 2015, and in that summer, Yoelkis Goriel, who's kind of, I hate to say the forgotten brother, but and also as a little bit of an aside, one of my favorite things about Cuba sometimes is the name. So there's Yoelkis, and Lourdes Jr., but everybody calls him Unito.
Yes.
So some of the names are funny, but Yoelkis Goriel and Alexei Bell, who tried for a little bit to, he was in the Texas system, were playing for Quebec City, and so that kind of opened my eyes to that. But basically, I believe it's the president of Quebec City had first brokered that deal, and they've been bringing players up every year, and then in 2016 is when they did the first CanAm tour, which was really preparatory for the World Baseball Classic. We had as many guys as possible that were going to be playing together there to kind of bond and play together. And actually, the most recent tour is kind of a preparatory for the Pan American Games, which I think are going to be happening in August in Lima, Peru. So, so there's been quite a bit of an infusion. We've seen some of the better names come through over the last couple of years. So specifically in 2016 was Louis Robert, who hopefully you guys will see soon enough in Chicago. I think he's got people tantalized, and I think he looks like he's going to make the jump. And there were a few other players that were on that tour that have since now gone on and are kind of at different stages in the minors, including Victor Mesa, and so maybe Céspedes might be the next one on that, but we shall see.
You mentioned Luis Robert, but in Double-A, he's tearing it up right now in Double-A for the White Sox system. Is he one of those players? A lot of people that I've read about say that he might be the best of the bunch for the Chicago Prospects, which is saying something because they have a deep farm system.
Yeah, no doubt. It's he looks to be legit. Like I said, he's kind of a crop. If this sounds funny, he's a crop of young Cuban players that are better athletes, but that doesn't guarantee a better ball player, except that I think that he might be a little bit ahead of it.
Sure.
And he's one of the guys that definitely during his time in the Cuban League, I think he won the MVP in 19 or something in those regards, was a key member of a couple championship teams. So he stood out, and he's definitely. I was following a little bit more at the beginning of the year when he was with A-Ball, but got off to a hot start. Looks like that's continuing in Double-A, and so I think depending on what their path is for him, we could probably see him in September. But I think he's one of the guys that will probably make that instant impact. Well, pulling for him anyway. So
now, speaking about players and playing internationally and their path, how do you think that the decision by the Trump administration, as far as not allowing Cuban players to come and play here, how do you think that will affect the future of Cuba, the future of the Cuban players? Do you think that there will be one day when the players can come legally?
I hope so. I go back and forth on a level of this in terms of, obviously it's a very complex situation, and I was hoping that something maybe as trivial as baseball could be a great lever to pull. And, Cuba was actually saying all the right things, which surprised quite a few people, that fundamentally the money would not go to the top, that it would be infused back into the into the league, into the development. And if that's the case, I'm all for that. And at the same time, a safe passage for players to make their way. So it's a little bit tough. I mean, my thought on what the actual pipeline is that it would take a few years under their current structure that they propose there to see a few impact players come over. Not that would stop the guys that want to get out. So I mean, I've heard different rumblings that most of the human traffickers thankfully have been kind of eliminated, but it does not mean that they're not always lurking, and this recent decision may open the door for that again. This is largely conjecture on my part. I think that the top level guys will always be somewhat insulated. They'll have people of influence giving them good advice. It's more on the human side, the humanitarian side, that there's probably a lot of guys that maybe they're fringy prospects, but they get the wrong person in their ear that could potentially manipulate them, and that's a dangerous thing, and I don't think anybody wants to see that. So
yeah. Because for as many Jose Abreu's and Yuli Gurriel's, there's double the amount that won't reach that level, unfortunately.
And just like here in the States,
I mean, States, anywhere.
Not everybody makes it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a tough road, and so I mean, I guess the eventual hope would be for a freer, more prosperous Cuba, with baseball thriving on all kinds of different levels, with some money being infused in there, and so I mean, some of it is happening, but it's very complex, and even with as much as I know about it, I'm still confused by a lot of it. And when you think things are going one way, then they go another. So it's very interesting. But it's a wonderful baseball culture that I'd love to see preserved, grow, and thrive, and as long as in any way that I can help to do that, to try to, and it's one of the safest places I've ever visited, and the people are friendly, and they love to share the baseball culture with you. It's just not that easy sometimes.
Yeah,
they kind of struggle on the marketing side, as you can well imagine.
Yeah, and I will say your website or your the work you do is great, and you really elevate the Cuban Baseball League and Cuban baseball. Is there like what's next for you? Like, is there something that you hope to accomplish soon?
Well, and at the same time, I'd like to give a shout out to a guy who's done a little bit of work for you as well, and that hopefully I'm going to partner with a little bit more in the future. And that's Yusuf Diaz down in Miami for Pelota Cubana blog. He breaks a lot of great stories, and had an opportunity to kind of sit down with him recently. We're hoping, if things work out, to maybe capture the Caribbean series in the spring and kind of take his storytelling. There's only so far I can go with it with the lack of Spanish. I'm trying to learn more Spanish. Sure. And, he's got a lot of contacts there. So if we take my storytelling and his narrative together, is kind of a thing that we're looking to hopefully grow upon. So.
That'll be interesting to see. We'll look forward to it.
Yeah, and I gotta ask you, when you're in Cuba, what's the go-to meal? What are you eating? What's the first thing you're looking for?
So I'm distinctively North American. I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy, and this might surprise you. That it's hamburguesas, although they are getting better. They are getting better.
Yeah,
they are getting better. Although a close second, although it's a little bit hard to come by, is the rock lobster is to die for. If you can get a fresh serving of lobster tail, is incredible. It's just mind blowing.
What are some of your favorite places to visit on the island?
Yeah, so my first love was probably Cienfuegos. So home of the Elefantes, and again in Chicago, you guys should be very familiar as Abreu and Moncada are from there. So that's where I first went to. The structure of the league kind of changed my approach a little bit, because they have 16 teams. The season starts kind of mid-August, runs until typically January, but at the halfway mark in October, only 6 teams advance now. Okay. They do a dispersal draft, and because all of the best players for Cienfuegos are in Chicago, they typically don't advance. So that moved most of my plans to Havana, and Havana's a fascinating city, and in as much as this will be popular for a lot of people in Cuba if they're watching, be unpopular because Industriales is considered the Yankees of Cuban baseball. People love them or hate them, and of course they get a lot of the attention there. But that's kind of the easiest jumping off point for me, and spending more time in Havana. But also I'm proud to say that can call a couple of players my friends now, and they show me a lot of great hospitality when I come down, and so it's a great spot.
Awesome. Do you have a nickname? Do they give you a nickname? Do they call you, I don't know, El Gringo?
No. There's a little. So one of the crews in Cienfuegos referred to me as the fourth Gurriel brother, Phil Selig.
And what was the reasoning behind that?
Well, we were. So I'm hoping it was a compliment. We were hitting baseballs on the beach, and they looked at they must have seen something in my swing and said, "Oh, he's the lost Gurriel brother." So.
That's great. That's a great nickname.
Yeah.
Next time we have you on, we're gonna have to put Phil Selig, photojournalist / Philly Eskia.
Yeah. Fourth
Gurriel brother. Yes. I want to ask you one rapid fire question.
Sure.
I wanted to ask this at the beginning, and I completely forgot. But who's your favorite player growing up?
For me, it's definitely Don Mattingly.
Don Mattingly, okay.
So big Yankees fan growing up as a kid, even in Canada. So, I mean, people assume it's Blue Jays country. My parents tried to get me on board with that, but it was kind of passed down through my older brother and through my grandmother, big Yankees tradition. And so always been a Mattingly fan, and still try and wear 23 when I can, and actually hoping to meet up in Miami with them someday. So maybe this will get me one step closer.
Awesome.
Well, good luck with that. Are you still a Yankee fan?
Yeah, absolutely.
There we go. They're looking pretty good.
Looking forward to this weekend. So.
Yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited for that too.
Oh, thank you so much, Phil, for being on with us and hanging in there through our technical difficulties. Yeah. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing more of your work.
Perfect. Thank you. Stay in touch, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Adios.
Thanks. Have a great weekend.
You too.